What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Young Legends podcast. I'm your host, Caption, aka Caption Red, and we have a really great guest today, Mr. Jared Pogue. Jared Pogue is a licensed professional counselor working out of Woodstock, Georgia. He provides counseling for men and adolescents. He helps with issues such as anxiety, depression, grief, career dissatisfaction, and personal distress. Jared is also the host and creator of Restoration Counseling of Atlanta's podcast. Jared, thank you so much for joining me today. How's your day going, man?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. My day is going okay. I start the day off every single morning exactly the same, believe it or not. My days are actually pretty boring in the morning, but I love it boring. It is. I have the exact same breakfast. It's 2 slices of toast, peanut butter on one, jelly on the other. I have that with black coffee. I only drink black coffee. And I will sit in the same chair, usually listening to some music or maybe some sort of video that I found online that I think is either pertinent or funny or something like that. And then I'll just sit there and spend like 10 minutes just sort of not zoning out, but kind of reflecting, thinking about the day, kind of offering myself some like, not so much here's what you need to do today, but kind of like, hey, here's who you are each day. And I try to grab onto that just a little bit. And that's how I spent this morning, just like I try to spend every morning. And it was it's always a very good experience for me.
No, that's awesome, man. I mean, since you're a trained therapist, I might start doing that because you know a thing or two about this stuff, right?
Yeah, right. Like I think a lot of models of that were given to me, and I thought they were most of them weren't for me. So I just kind of made up my own based on the principles. And I thought this one really, for the most part, worked the best.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Very cool. Well, I'm really excited about this conversation we're about to have. And, it's going to help me if nothing else.
There we go. My audience of one, I'm always down to help.
There we go. Yeah. So, before we get started, though, what I like to do when I do my podcast interviews is I like to ask my guests to share a fun story, a funny story, a cool story. Everybody loves a good story. So do you have a story to share with myself and my audience?
Oh, absolutely. I want to share a quick story about when I was in college. I guess technically maybe just exiting college. I was either in my last semester or I had just finished. I can't quite remember the exact time. But I had sort of just started dating my now wife. Then I guess if we were dating, we were probably in a relationship. And I had this really strong desire, living in a house with 5 guys, mind you, by the way, to throw this nice romantic dinner for her that I cooked myself. I was just really wanting to show like, hey, I'm marriage material. You want to marry me, and it's going to be based off of my great cooking skills. There was only one major problem. I didn't know how to cook at all. Sure. At all. So I went to the grocery store and I thought, all right, what's this like? What's a good romantic meal? And so I think a lot of people, particularly if you aren't that versed in that concept of romantic meals like I was, you'd pick Italian. Sounds good. Nothing wrong with Italian food. So I went and grabbed a box of tuna helper.
Okay.
And I said, yes, these are Italian noodles. And guess what? They already come with their own sauce in here. Wow. How smart. This is brilliant. I'm totally down with that. What do I need with this? Let's see. I need some sort of protein, some sort of meat. So right next to tuna helper, if you go to the grocery store that I was going to at that time, is canned chicken.
Nice.
Let me tell you something about canned chicken. If you've ever had canned tuna, canned chicken is the exact same concept, except for it is fully cooked chicken that's put into let's put the nice word around it, preservative that has a tuna taste. So let's call this a tuna preservative. So I said, yes, this is perfect. I'm going to have this, what in my mind was wonderful pasta on the side and this nice chicken. So I cooked the meal. I don't know if you can really call that cooking. I got a pot ready and I just kind of like threw the stuff in there at the same time and made this one mega dish, which was tuna helper with these like freeze-dried green peas that were questionably green peas, and this canned chicken, which I've never tasted. Knew nothing about it. So she gets there and I've hyped her up for this big romantic meal. And I'm like, okay, great. I've made this for you. And I get this basically what boils down to this folding table, this something you'd find for like $5 at a store. And I throw it down there and I have these 2 collapsible chairs there with it that are about equal priced. And I plate on these paper plates, this tuna helper with this chicken that's supposed to be chicken, at least. That's what I think it's supposed to be. That was already fully cooked, but yet for some reason I cooked it for like 25 minutes just to be safe.
Nice.
Which is not the way to do it. And she took one bite, and I give her so much credit for, pretending that the meal was good.
Right.
But she said it was one of the worst things she's ever tasted in her life.
Nice.
It was this miserable experience, and that at the end of the day, she was like, oh no, he's not going to be doing any of the cooking in this household.
Yeah.
But the good news is I cook most of the meals in the household today. I've come quite a way since then. So
nice.
If you're going for the romantic dinners, I highly suggest you avoid tuna helper and canned chicken.
Yeah, man. I will definitely spread the word on no tuna helper or canned chicken.
It's very important that you spread that word.
Nice. Definitely. Awesome, man. Very cool. Well, you sealed the deal, so that's all that matters. Here we go. Very cool. So I got a quick question for you, and I've been asking all of my guests this question.
Please.
What have you been doing to stay sane recently, as we've been in shutdown for over 3 months now? Because I have my things that I do, and I'm curious on what everybody else is doing as life is different now.
Yeah, I think there's often an expectation, particularly when you're in my field. I'm a professional counselor and have a what was an in-person practice is currently an online practice. Will probably quickly, hopefully, shift back to some in-person. But I think when you're in my field of professional counseling, people assume like, oh man, you've got this discipline nailed down. You know exactly how to manage these things. You're going to be able to have all of this wonderful information that you've put into your own life. And the thing is, I'm a person too. Like I try not to let anyone forget that. Like at the end of the day, sure, I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing. I'm licensed, all of that. But I still struggled with it. I think it's really healthy to sit there and say, like, first, before I even offer anything that I did, like there was a lot of struggle there, and there was a lot that happened, and there was a lot of discomfort, and there was a lot of like deep dread and existential anxiety. All of that stuff was there. So as I offer like, how have I been handling over the last 3 months? It's a difficult question, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that just because I have the answers that I was really great at always doing them. I think a lot of it was figuring out my own flow and what worked for me, finding my own patterns during the middle of that.
Sure.
I've got a daughter, and so she is the dictator of most of my schedule. And with COVID, we weren't taking her school had closed down. We weren't taking her up to my parents or anything like that. So she was just here, and she is wonderful, but full of energy. So, it was mostly like survival mode for the first maybe 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
And then finally we got some testing done. Everything came back negative. So I started taking her up there. So the way that I stayed sane was very, very simple at the end of the day. Was I just kind of put my mind towards the stuff that had to get done in that day. And then I made space for everything else. That was it. So I think for me, the answer was make a ton of space, really focus on just a couple of the things that you got to get done, whatever that may be that day. And then allow that space to be whatever it is. So I think for me, it was a lot of lowering the bar in a certain regards and being okay with that, right?
Yeah.
Like that. And that was a discipline. That was an idea to grow in, right? This idea of like, okay, I can lower my own expectations. I can lower the bar. And it's okay because we're in this like pretty unprecedented territory, to quote, everyone that's saying unprecedented.
Right.
So I think that's essentially how I've been staying sane. Isn't a certain task I've been doing or a new hobby. Like I couldn't even play games at all for the first 6 to 8 weeks. Right. So like that's how flooded my COVID was. So things that I used to do that on occasion that were real fun, I couldn't even get to. So most of my traditional coping skills or coping strategies were actually taken away from me just due to all those circumstances. So yeah, hopefully that sort of gives you an idea of the types of things that I was doing was surviving.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, that I'm glad that you said that because I think that people feel, that they're the only ones struggling right now, and to know that everybody's on the struggle bus to varying degrees is good to hear. Because when you feel like you're the only one failing, that's a terrible feeling. But when you feel like, hey, everybody's failing, hey,
Yeah.
this is great, or not great, but I mean, this is just the way it is right now.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's real helpful to know that.
yeah, absolutely. So you said coping, right?
Yeah.
That's a very important thing that we're all doing during this time. And so we're here in this new normal. We're stuck inside the house. Some people are going out, unfortunately, but most people, I would hope, are still socially distancing. So, what recommendations do you have about like coping in your home environment? What is somebody supposed to do when they're stuck at home? I mean, I am not a homebody. Uh, so, I've been doing my own things to help me just kind of just get out there and feel normal. What do you tell young people I mean, you're stuck at home and yeah, you leave the house sometimes. Sure, of course you do. But what are the coping mechanisms with that in mind?
Yeah, I jokingly say this is like the time to be an introvert. If you're on the introvert side of things, this is like your year of jubilee in a certain
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
It's this
Absolutely.
wonderful year of like, all right, like everything I wanted to get to. So I think introverts are having a little bit easier time adjusting to this on the whole. But I think nevertheless, you're bringing up some good points with like, okay, even that gets boring, and it's especially difficult for people who have to get out there. So there've been some general things that I've been pushing to people. They're not the first thing I'd advertise is they're not like instant fixes.
Right.
And no individual one is going to just solve the problem. Typically, I encourage people to start with a very loose, structured set of goals for each day. I think that's one of the best things that people can do to keep sanity. Some people like to write this out on a piece of paper. Some people like to put it up on their mirror. Some people like to type it on a computer. I'm a tech person, so I got a running list actually through Evernote
Right.
of these sort of things that like I have 5 things that I want to do every single day. And these things aren't necessarily like wash the dishes, do do financial stuff, right? Like a lot of these things are, how do I want to treat myself today? What is one, for me, it's something along the lines of, what is one piece of self-compassion I can hold on to at this moment, right? That's true. So they can be personal things. I don't think they need to just be do this task. If you boil it down to just a task, here is the task I have to get done. I think that can be its own type of oppressive for certain people. Some people are very much wired that way, so maybe that's a little bit better for them. But it's more of a, here are the sort of list of things that I want to get out of this day. How do I make this day meaningful? Is maybe the best way to ask that.
Yeah.
So I like a written piece of paper or something that tracks that. These things that say, if I've done this, if I've taken part of this, if I've been able to grasp this, my day hasn't been a waste, right? So even on a tough day, you can circle back to that thing, be reminded of your progress, of what you actually did take on, feel encouraged to some degree by that, even as we continue to face heaps of anxiety. That's usually the first thing that I want people to do. And usually I work them through that list. Like, what is significant? What is needed? You can usually find out what is needed by hearing what is hurting. Best way to put that. So
Right.
I could talk about that part for hours. I'll just kind of table it there to sort of go on to part 2, right? So connected to that, I typically want them to get out if they can, not so much in an environment where there's lots of people, but things like going on walks, or if you there was a local restaurant that had all their chairs and everything set up. No one was at for a long time, but you could go over there and sit at the tables and, just kind of have time to yourself, right? So I encourage pretty much everybody to do something like that. Either go for a walk where there's not a ton of people, or if there's more people than you'd like, wear a mask, or go at off hours, right? Go sit at a table by yourself, right? And bring stuff with you that you enjoy. That can be maybe, a notepad that you want to write stuff down on. That can be your smartphone with some headphones in, listening to some music you've been wanting to listen to. It could be watching videos. It could be just sitting in silence and watching, which is always a fun thing to do, right?
Sure.
So being outside and somehow connecting to yourself in that process, which points to number 3. The last thing I think I push most people to is self-connection. There's a tendency to, in the time of isolation of COVID especially, we really have issues, notable issues in listening to ourselves. And I think that's why it's particularly hard for people who may be more on the extroverted scale, because they're not used to hearing that inner dialogue as much as maybe some of the introverts. And they may be coming across things that are a little foreign or scary, or they're trying to repress, or they just don't want to entertain. Those things are real. I don't want to throw those out there, but I think there's another side of that too, where there's a lot of positive, good things, right? So I want people to cultivate some sort of positive connection with themselves, either through an activity or through silence. Not everything has to be mindfulness meditation, but I always want something that keeps them grounded.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Staying grounded is, it's, it's the thing we need right now. And speaking of which, you just mentioned mindfulness and meditation. So a lot of people don't meditate. I think more people are now during these times, just because you got to do something to keep yourself sane. So what do you tell people who are resistant or just kind of can't get into the habit of meditating, right? I think that's the hardest part, is developing the habit in the first place. So what would you tell them?
Yeah, so one of the first things I really intentionally aim for is not to use the word meditate.
Right.
I find that it can come with a lot of baggage or expectation, or it is a loaded term. And for some people, that's a positive loaded term, and for some people, it's negative. If you have an established practice or routine of meditation, then it's going to come with a positive feeling. It's going to come with a positive expectation. If you're got a negative picture of it, obviously it's going to come with negative. You're going to be avoidant of it. Most people are somewhere in the middle of those two things, that they probably have some friends that do meditation and they say great things, but they've also heard various things about meditation. And they're like, well, I don't know if that's really going to be for me. So one of the first things I would say is I try not to push people to the word meditation. Instead, I push them to the idea of mindfulness. Mindfulness is essentially the exact same thing, or at least very similar. You could say it is technically a part of meditation, but I do like to differentiate it just a little bit. Mindfulness is simply being connected to yourself, being aware of yourself. It is using, if you want to be super psychological, it is using your frontal lobe as a way of grounding yourself within reality. Sure. Doesn't sound as fun, but
no,
it is
not at all.
Yeah, it is just a way of being very present in the moment, is the best way to describe that. And so the first place to begin is, there's lots to be anxious about. I'm not here to lie or say otherwise. There's tons to be anxious about on a social system perspective. There's tons to be anxious about on a personal system perspective. That's all waiting for you. But during times of mindfulness, that can sort of be put on the back shelf in the background. You can take these little moments and make something beautiful of them. In fact, not even just make something beautiful, but actually see something beautiful there. That's usually the invite that I want to give to people. There's something really great here if you can push this aside for now. It is still there. It's still going to be waiting for you. I'm not asking you to check out for the rest of your life. I'm just kind of asking for 5 minutes here.
Right.
The next thing I push to people with mindfulness is the idea that it does not have to be, all right, let me clear my schedule, go to this part of my room, fold my legs up, or do this. Like, I do it sitting in a chair while I'm eating toast, right? Like, I sort of discussed that one earlier a little bit. It can be done anywhere, in any sort of position, at any given time, no matter what's going on around you. You can be at work, literally just sort of turn off your computer screen or look away from it or something like that, to take 2 minutes and just begin to, and this can sound like a really difficult process, but it can be easier than you think, sort of shut your mind off a little bit, shut up the productivity part of your mind, and instead just kind of quite literally physically feel what's there. As I'm talking to you, I'm sitting on a couch right now, and I sort of check out I go into my mindfulness mode. I'm just kind of aware of the moment. I can actually feel each individual fiber of the couch on my leg. Right. And then I just kind of concentrate on that. I'm not trying to do anything with it. I'm not trying to give it a label. I'm not trying to define it as positive, negative, uncomfortable, comfortable, anything like that. I'm just accepting that it's there. I'm just feeling that it's there. What's it like to feel each one of these fibers on my leg? Is there one that's more pressing than another? Is there one that is stands out or that is uneven? What am I feeling, right? Sometimes I push people to do things like, what does your fingertips feel like? How do they feel against each other? And just to push the sort of like pads of your fingers somewhat gently together, right? You're not trying to squish something here. You're just feeling the actual pads of your fingers as a way of just stopping your mind from being productive, right? That's a really easy way, I think, to get to this. Mindfulness sounds really scary and difficult. I actually think it can be once you remove a lot of the barriers of things like meditation as a term or the challenges and the difficulties, I think it really does boil down to just, I'm taking the productivity part of my brain, I'm taking the future part of my brain, or even the past part of my brain, and I'm just pushing it to the side a little bit, right? I'm letting it take a breather so I can see whatever's in this moment, right? So that could be where you're sitting, you're feeling an air conditioner just kind of run up against your face, and you can feel that air, right? It could be feeling the fabric of your own clothes. Have you ever thought about how your clothes feel on your back? How does your shirt feel right now? How do your pants rub up against your legs? Right? Are you wearing socks, and what are they like around your feet? What is your middle toe feeling right now? Right? This is stuff we never think about at all. And so I think they're great pathways to getting our brains to quiet down just to see what's there. From there, it really is just every time your brain starts to go to a place of, I'm thinking about this COVID anxiety, what's going to happen with my job. That's fine. Your brain's going to do that. It's okay. Make peace with that and just kind of return to something. That's why I offer these ideas of like, what does this feel like right now? Right. Basing a lot of these questions in the right now, as well as focusing on the breath. The breath is really amazing in the human body. Believe it or not, like one of the best things you can do to cope with anxiety or depression at any given moment is literally taking big breaths. Slow, big breaths is physiologically and psychologically speaking, like the absolute best calming experience that anybody can have. It has to do with this thing called the vagus nerve. I'm not really going to get into it too much. But this is not a science podcast. I'm not
right. No, but that's yeah. Good.
If you can't do anything else to begin to capture mindfulness, the biggest thing I'd say is stop, take these big breaths, and feel them go in and out. What do they feel like as they go in? What do they feel like as they go out? And just
awesome,
just continually going back to that. Your brain again is going to go somewhere else. Just continue to go back to the breaths. I think is one of the best ways I'd get people to begin doing mindfulness in a day-to-day basis.
Right. So sounds like one of the things that I'm hearing from you is just do it where you can. Do it like, with whatever you got in front of you, where you can, how you can, that whole thing. So that's awesome.
I like to describe it as there's a million opportunities, and you certainly do not need to grab all of them. Just a couple are fine.
Yeah.
So, there may be a few select people out there that do have to put that onto their to-do list. But I think for most people, it is making a conscious choice to take that moment just to breathe for 1 minute, 2 minutes. Don't demand a lot of time of yourself, but doing a number of these micro exercises, as it were, these micro exercises can be absurdly more beneficial than if you had taken 30 minutes or an hour to sit there and listen to someone like John Cabot Zinn, who's a meditation and mindfulness expert. Those little moments are often worth way more than just one big moment in the morning.
Sure, absolutely. And that's the thing that I do when I meditate. I'm just like, all right, dude, just do it for 3 or 5 minutes, just just get something in. So, and that's, same thing I do with exercise. A little bit of something is better than none. So
exactly.
Very cool. Yeah. Now, everything we've talked about up until this point is all stuff about you, yourself, making tasks, meditation, so on and so forth. But a huge part of our lives are cut off, I mean, we don't have our friends around. We have this these feelings of loneliness because we are isolated now. So what are the coping strategies that you tell your clients, or the advice that you have to deal with that? Because human beings are social animals, and it's weird right now that we can't be social animals.
No, I'm following you 100% here. With a lot of things, you'll often hear me break things into introvert and extrovert categories. I don't want to paint those as black and white, but I will say this is a good opportunity for me to take those two. So with introverts, like I said, it's kind of their year of jubilee until it's not. And then it's terrible, right? Because on the opposite side with extroverts, typically they have a number of friends they already have. They're sort of changing their systems, which I'll get to in a minute. But with introverts, they may not have much of a social system, particularly if a lot of their social system was work and now they're unemployed. So for them, I'm going to give a different set of answers, and I tend to give a different sets of answers when I'm in the office. I generally like to embrace the idea for people that know they want to be social and they know it's important. They feel that part of them, but they struggle. Whether it's they feel like they lack the traditional social skills, they haven't had the opportunity, maybe they feel like they blossomed later. There's a lot of reasons why, or just their innate personality is they only want 2 or 3 friends, which is completely okay. One of the things that I ask them to do is actually become a bit more active in online communities that are about their interests. So I'm going to dip into something for me during this time that I decided to do was I got a lot more active in a lot of online therapist groups. These are usually all over the country. People are asking various questions. There are other therapists that might be, talking about state laws or obviously national laws or, tough cases or, things like that, right? So I found myself, and I encourage others as well to do something very similar, to get involved with these online groups in a much deeper way, instead of being a lurker, actually being a contributor and staying connected to those conversations, right? Contribute, offer, receive, respond. If you're someone who struggles with those sort of things, build that presence online, particularly if you can around either one of your hobbies and interests that you enjoy or around your profession. There's going to be tons of networks, regardless of what you do for the most part, that you're going to be able to connect into and establish with, that when you get out of COVID, or however that's going to go, I don't know, whatever is going to happen, you're going to have something to show for it, number one. And number two, you're going to feel connected to these people. And it's no longer to go to, oh, these are coworkers or these are people that are in my field. It's like, okay, no, we've kind of sort of established a friendship, even if I don't know this person in real life.
Right.
Social media has helped a ton with that. So you don't have to be an anonymous person, with some username. You can be you and get involved with something like a Facebook group or something like that. But it can also be something with the username as well. It's the Outback Statehouse, no rules, just rights.
Right.
There's no wrong way to do it. So.
Sure. All right. So it sounds like Facebook groups, Reddit, those sorts of things are the places that people need to go to kind of connect. And I'm sure there's others as well. Real quick, some people actually don't know the difference between extrovert and introvert. So could you kind of just summarize what both of those are, give a definition, and then, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of different ways to explain the ideas. I think the way that I like to settle on it, and I think a lot of professionals will settle on it, is introverts tend to get their energy by being alone, by being by themselves, right? They sort of get recharged. Think of like batteries getting charged. And that allows them then to go out into the world and do what they have to do, and their energy sort of depletes. And once they hit that stopping point, they got to go back to introversion land. Maybe that's their room, maybe that's an office, somewhere they're alone and sort of with themselves. Extroverts get their energy from being with other people. By being social, by being active, by going out, they're actually charging their batteries. Mm-hmm. They're getting energy. They're getting the ability to do and to be, if you want to put it into those terms. And then they can dive into what I'd call more personal tasks. So maybe that's, I got to go work. I go write this thing. I got to do this homework, whatever it may be. That's typically where I like to put the difference between introverts and extroverts.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm definitely an extrovert. So tell me what I can do to survive and thrive during this time.
Yes. This is not your year of jubilee. Sorry.
No, it's not.
And ironically, that's kind of the very first thing that I would tell yourself and people like you, right? Like you are going to have to take on a different set of expectations for yourself. You're going to have to be prepared to kind of be running on low battery for a little while. And that's okay, right? Like that's something you have to give. I think you have to offer yourself kind of every day is, hey, I'm not in my element here. I'm going to be a little bit off. I'm going to be a little bit fuzzy. I'm going to do what I can. But I think first setting that expectation of like, okay, this is going to be hard. This is going to be extra challenging. This is going to be extra difficult, right? So there's small little things to start with to know like, all right, I got to get my metaphorical batteries charged. So what am I going to do here? Sure. I mean, we can talk about things like group chats. We can talk about things like texting. We can talk about things like FaceTime. We can talk about things like phone calls, which are all fantastic. Like, don't hear me throwing those out. Those are all things that probably need to be put into that daily list that I talked about earlier. Extroverts are going to need to contact people in a personal way at least once a day. Right. I don't want to put that hard of a rule on somebody, but just knowing, depending where you fall on the extrovert scale, you're going to have to plan out some sort of longer form of conversation with somebody at least once a day.
Sure.
Phone calls, I think for extroverts tend to do a lot better than texts. Though I think texting's kind of been replaced by meme sharing, but that's a whole nother story.
Right.
That is a part of it, right? That is a part of it. I'm not throwing any shade at it. I actually think it can be a really great thing, but they're going to need more than that, right? If you're looking professionally for extroverts, there's online networking events going on, often in a number of professions. That's one of the things I actively encourage, a big push, online network. They usually are done with a large Zoom call, right? There's free online classes everywhere. I'm certain I can sort of in post shoot you a bunch of links to different ones that you can actually be in a room digitally with a whole bunch of people and you're listening to a speaker, and that's going to sort of scratch that itch in a real way. So anywhere you can kind of find anything that resembles what was once the extrovert lifestyle, yes, go for it. More active presence on social media is actually showing some really good data, particularly during this time, that if you are someone who is extroverted, but maybe not that social media, savvy or comfortable or confident, this is actually a really good time to get your voice out there a little bit more because it's scratching a lot of those similar itches. Again, it's definitely not one for one here. Please don't hear me say that, but it is contributing. I've had people that I recommended to do basically like lunch dates online every day, especially if you're extroverted. Message with your friends, message with colleagues that you want to get to know. Hey, let's do an online lunch date, right? And you're both sitting at your tables, having your sandwiches or whatever it is that you're making for lunch, and you're just maybe not saying that much. Maybe you are. Hopefully, you're creating some sort of conversation. But if you're not, it's just nice to have someone eating lunch there with you. I think the hardest part about that is being a little bit vulnerable, and you're going to have to say like, hey, I'd love to do this work lunch thing with you. You have to be okay with accepting the fact that it is a little bit uncomfortable right now. So that's going to be going on. Those are little ideas that I like to do. I'd say the same thing with, there's a really great plugin through Google Chrome that allows you to watch Netflix at the same time as other people. Yeah. I think it's called Netcast, but don't quote me on that. I'll have to look that one up later. But that's a really good, like, let's have a watch party, pop popcorn, get together. And it's like a movie night at your house. You can talk to the people beforehand. You can talk to the people afterhand. You can have a number of people. It's not just one other party. It's everyone that sort of like plugs in with you here. Things like that are going to be really, really helpful. Planning those on your calendar are much more important than being spontaneous with these. I think extroverts are going to run into an extra hard sort of roadblock if they try to plan this spontaneously, because again, anyone around you that's an extrovert's running on low batteries right now. And what's the last thing you want to do on low batteries is plan for something unpredictable.
Right.
So instead, I think the extrovert's friend is the calendar. So if you're an unorganized extrovert, sorry, it's gonna be a learning opportunity for people who are extroverted but aren't good with calendars.
Yeah, and that's me to a degree, but I've been getting a lot better, and it's the calendar has been helping a lot with all of that. So yeah, and I've been going out public places and just getting my fix, which has been super helpful. So as we sit here and talk about this this pandemic we're going through, some people already deal with some depression, and now you have a pandemic and you have depression, and then it's like, all right, let's just exacerbate this whole situation. So what do you tell your clients in regards to that? Like, how are they going to overcome this depression with a extra side of depression?
Yeah, right. It's like a large size, and then okay, well, here's a double extra large on the side of that. So no, I'm tracking with you on that one, right? Like, you've got a couple of different things when it comes to depression going on right now, right? I mean, one I'm not even going to touch so much, at least, is the fact of like, what if you have a major job transition or shift or layoff during this time? I could go for about an hour on that, so I'm going to have to sort of put that particular population on hold a little bit,
sure,
and just offer that like that's its own unique series of things, right? For the others I want to concentrate on, right? Like, there's going to be two population groups. One, you've already kind of hit on the idea of people who were already dealing with depression in some way, shape, or form, and now they've got this giant highlighter that is COVID that is going to amplify their feelings of depression, or the stressors that are causing them depression one way or another, or pulling out their depression, as it were. Two, another population you have going on are people who didn't know they were depressed. Depression's one of the strangest diseases, and it is a disease. Like, I'm going to be super clear about that whenever I talk about depression. Depression is most looked at and understood as a biological disease. There's another thing called dysphoria, which is just things are bad and I feel really bad, right? And so this is just me offering a couple little clinical definitions. Depression is typically something that goes more than about weeks. If it's sustained more than usually 6 weeks, you leave the category of dysphoria from a clinical standpoint. Something between 6 weeks and 6 months. Now my brain's telling me otherwise, but I think it's 6 weeks. You're leaving the idea of dysphoria either way once you hit that number, and you're entering into, okay, yeah, we think this is clinical depression. It's the best way to look at that. So with those sort of out of the way, I think you're finding that some group of people are discovering, oh man, it's not so much that just COVID is hard. It is absolutely hard. It turns out I've been depressed this whole time and I didn't know it. I was going out and I was with friends and doing stuff and being out there, and there was this feeling here the whole time I've been pushing away, and now I can't push this away anymore. Right. For a lot of people, they'll find that they do these social activities, or they keep their calendar so busy and so active that they cannot, or at least refuse to, connect with themselves. Now that they're forced to look themselves in the mirror, as it were, they find that everything's really jaded and dark and painful or apathetic, which is another part of depression that's there too. So I think those people are having a very unique type of crisis. You're seeing the number of antidepressant medication go up right now, and rightfully and understandably so. Same thing with ADHD. Believe it or not, actually some of these feelings can be more linked to ADHD than they can be depression. That's a whole nother talk. Sorry about that one. But that you would know if you'd be something closer to ADHD versus depression if it came more with a sense of failure that was unrelenting. So something I just want to throw out there. Not a medical doctor, so technically not medical advice, but it is something that I do find is present. So I want to state that is something I've seen, but you would want to talk with a doctor to clear that, right? He's going to be able to know, or a psychiatrist to be even more on the record. But one of the symptoms absolutely can be for ADHD that you're having this sense of failure that's then becoming a depression. So something I want to give a quick nod to, because I think it's really important to get out there. So the population that this depression is new to them, I think are going to be facing a lot different. It's going to be a part awakening, part horror, part, painful experience, part maybe even in a way kind of freeing, that they finally can start getting a label and an identity to this. For people that were already struggling with depression, you're looking at something around the lines of like 20 to about 20-ish% of Americans are going to be facing depression at some point in their lives. So 1 out of every 5. That's old data. I bet you if you got more new data on that, you'd actually find that closer to about 1 in 3. If you did that on the millennials, I assume that would be like 95%. But hey, that's another story.
Right.
That doesn't mean those people won't face dysphoric, really bad times. We're talking clinical depression with this. So let's put that number anywhere between 1 and 5 or up to 1 and 3. I feel fairly comfortable with. So that's a huge number. If you had a class of 30 students, I mean, you're looking almost about 1 in every 10. 1 in every 3 of those. So 10 students that could potentially, very likely, have depression, clinically speaking, at some point in their life. So when we talk about people who are depressed already, and this is just making it worse, we're talking about a large number of Americans here, a large number of Americans.
All right.
So for them, I think the strategies are a little bit different. When I work with these people, first thing I usually work on is setting expectations. Okay, you were already facing this disease and it was already doing this to you. So let's talk about how this is going to get amplified and what that's going to look like. It's going to be a lot worse. So the things you're going to get done, the things that you're going to be contributing to are going to be a lot lower, or at least notably lower. The things that you are experiencing, difficulty getting out of bed, difficult starting your day, they're going to be, well, worse. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. Right? I actively want to stop people from beating themselves up about having a disease. And I want to be really clear with that terminology. That's exactly what it is, right? So that's setting expectations can't be said enough, especially for that population. Of people who already recognize their depression. If they're on medication, it is a great time to get that to consider at least getting that medication increased. There's no harm in that, provided you talk to your medical provider, whether that be a doctor, nurse practitioner, or psychiatrist. Whatever it is that you're using, you can use any one of those 3, at least in the state of Georgia. I can't tell you too much outside of the state, but in the state of Georgia. For some people, that's going to be a great idea. The point of this is not to be on that up dose forever. That's not the reason that you would consider something like this. But it could, again, particularly if you're already on that medication, be really, really helpful during this time. It's going to lower a lot of those like bed days, as it were, where you're just kind of stuck in bed or you can't move or you're extra struggling with motivation more than normal. That can be really, really helpful. For some people, this is absolutely going to be the start of medication. You know, they've been trying to manage for so long, particularly maybe I think the extroverts might be a little bit easier at managing that now they're going, okay, I think I have to test these waters. So I'm certainly pro medication. That can actually be a very, very good thing to jump into in this time. It does not mean that someone's on the medication forever is the good news. I think sometimes we feel, sort of glued to that. That is not how most people do psychological medications. So it's typically more for a set amount of time. Some people are, but most people it's, hey, this is tough and that's okay. Things are allowed to be tough and I'm going to give this a shot and see how it goes. So medication is actually a really, really great route. And I'm very pro it. Again, talk to a medical provider. Counselors don't diagnose in the state of Georgia, and they don't provide medicine. So I can only give so much outside of just a general recommendation. Talk to these people. I've seen some really, really great effects. So for other people that are facing depression, right? Like this is a good time to get into online support groups. This can be formal. This can be informal. You definitely have clinical groups that are going on and they're clinical. You've got a licensed therapist in there with you. Informal groups, I think, can be very effective as well. There's risks that come with that, obviously, but there is some positives too. I don't want to just throw them all out. Actually, I think you can find a lot of help through what I'm calling informal, just sort of like normal people getting together and just talking about what they're facing right now. Right?
Yeah.
Boy, I'm going to have to plug my profession at least a little bit. For some, this is a really great time to start counseling.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there, right? Trying to do my best not to overemphasize that one, but to also state this is a really good time to be doing this. One, you've got the time to like go back and face some of the things you've never faced before. You've got the time and the need, maybe even more importantly, to see what is there, to see what you're currently doing, to see what you can do that's outside of your normal, as it were, that can change your world, right? You've got the ability to allow somebody to look into your life with you, to hold your hand, to move forward together, to point you to things you've never seen that were contributors or things you refuse to touch, which is often the case for a number of people, for sure. you have someone who gets to be your advocate, who gets to be a helper in a very vulnerable sense. So this is a great time if people haven't gone counseling, or maybe they've been out of it for years. This is a great time to dive back in and make some of that progress. It is a little bit different online, but I guarantee you can still get a lot of great work done. I'm doing work online right now, and I would still say I have people making great breakthroughs, making tremendous progress, despite not us being in the same room. It's different, but different isn't always bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jared, we're almost out of time, but I would like to ask you one final question, because not everybody has access to counselors and therapists. So who would you tell people to talk to, especially young people, if one is not available to them, or what can they do to help themselves?
Yeah, right. So I think a lot of times, and I'm not going to throw too much shade at my profession, but just a little bit, I think sometimes we can all get aboard. A lot of people, or at least a number of people, can get a little too aboard the mental health train and saying, okay, well, you absolutely have to have a counselor. I would differentiate that a little bit and say it is an option. And for some people, it's a really good option. And for some people, maybe it's not the time. Maybe it really isn't a great option. Maybe they come in with so much baggage, they're just not going to get that much out of it. It is a financial commitment. I will not lie about that.
Sure.
So those are all very real things. And the last thing you would want is to say, okay, well, you can only make progress as a human being if you do this, right? So I would say that is untrue. It's a very nice thing. It can be very helpful. So if you have that as an opportunity, consider it. But if you don't, great. That's fine. There's a lot of other things that we can do, right? So what I think I want to do with this is point to a couple of resources and structures, right? One of the first I want to start with, particularly for the younger audience, if they use an app or a service called Discord. It's just sort of like a very large online discussion community group that's got 1 million plus. I mean, I'm sure it's like 10 million or some crazy number of subgroups, specifically with some dedicated to mental health, maybe even specifics. Maybe for someone who suffers with schizophrenia, bam, they got a schizophrenia support group in there, right? So like, yeah, there's for depression, there's tons. For general mental health issues, there's tons, right? It's free. Discord is completely free. Download the app, do it on your computer. If you're younger, you'll find that you can very quickly jump into it. Even if you're a little bit older, it's really not too difficult to get into. Use those, right? Understand it's not the same as clinical help. It's not, but it's a good thing, right?
Sure.
It's I want to sort of build the idea of a diet that you could sort of give yourself to sort of build out of this, as it were. And I'd say that's a really great part of the diet right there. One, it gets you interacting with others that are feeling the same way, which gives you perspective. Two, it can give you actually really good sort of like community to become a part of if you get more and more involved with that and you're contributing to something really positive there, obviously. Believe it or not, sharing your pain is actually a great way to help others. I know it sounds weird. It really is.
Yeah, no, it's true.
It absolutely is. There's a bit of nuance to that, but I would say that's can be very true. So there's a lot to be gained from those sort of servers. Discord's not the only place that you can get it, but it's one that I'm very familiar with. Next, we're going to be talking about a great app. I think a lot of people have heard of it. Is Headspace.
Yep, I use it.
Yeah. If you struggle with mindfulness and sort of getting yourself to calm down, Headspace is a really, really great app. I can't recommend enough. It's free, and there's a paid-for version. I'm not 100% certain what the paid-for version unlocks, but I'm sure that there's some really great services. I'm much more familiar with the free side of it, and that's fine. Use the free side of it, right? Like it is, having a guided mindfulness time is really, really important and helpful, particularly if you're so new to it. Hey, just let this app do the work for you. You just plug in the headphones, get the app to go, press the button, bam, you're doing it, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily overly complex or anything like that, is the great news. So Headspace is a really great app. There's a great audio book and regular book if you want to read it by a professor / author / speaker named John Cabot Zinn, which is real funny. His last name is Zinn, Zinn. That is a very kind of when you think of meditation, this is probably who you think of and you don't realize it. But he has a really great audiobook called Wherever You Go, There You Are. which is great to work through. You don't need to have any other supplementary materials. You can probably find some of the stuff out there that he's put out there for free on YouTube, where he walks you through that using a lot of mountain imagery. So if that's like you and you're like, yeah, man, I'm super into nature, I'm super into mountains, get into some John Cabot Zinn. I'd highly recommend him on the whole. I would also encourage, as strange as it sounds, any of the works, The Gift of Imperfection being a really good highlight here, by Brene Brown. Okay. She's a pop psychologist, really worth her weight in gold. There's a lot of positive that I can say about her work for sure. I think it's incredibly helpful if you particularly struggle with the issues of what I'm going to call vulnerability, which is kind of like letting your emotions, your hurts and your pains show, even in just little micro ways. She's a really, really good start to that. So The Gift of Imperfection is a great place to start. I know there's the book. There may be an audiobook version. I can't tell you off the top of my head if there's an audiobook, but I almost guarantee there's an audiobook version. There's also, you can begin to get into, not just the literature of self-help. There's a lot of that, but even expanding outside of that, I'm going to recommend the book Educated by Tara Westbrook. It's either Tara Westbrook or Tara Westover. I want to say it's Tara Westbrook, but I'll have to double check on that one. You can't miss it. It's called Educated. I guess it's technically nonfiction, but it is not self-help. It's just her sort of story of resilience during a very difficult time of trauma or a very difficult time of challenge. And I think that reading those stories can be helpful and inspiring. To find inspiration during this time is going to be one of the most helpful pieces that you can have. People who are facing isolation and deep pain somehow resonating with their stories, as it were. The final resource, I think I'd pushed you, and these are not all the resources. There's so many more I could give you off the top of my head, and maybe I'll put them all in we'll have to put them all in the liner notes or something like that. Mm-hmm. There is a great podcast called Other People's Problems. Yes, it is very good, by Dr. Hillary McBride. What that is, and I do have to give some content warnings for this one. So Dr. Hillary McBride is a therapist. It's what she does. She's also a podcaster. And she will take you into her office with real people and real clients.
Oh.
Yeah. This is not for the faint of heart, and go over real problems, right? So it's not like 60 minutes of hey, here is just 60 minutes of therapy, go. She'll usually take 5-minute snippets and then talk in between them to help you process them. You will find the topics will resonate with you. Not every single one, but you will find something that you struggle with, something that pounds at you, that presses at you. You will find it there. There's even a great episode on isolation and feeling lonely, or not. There's another great episode on not being able to express emotions, or feeling like you're not able to express emotions, at least in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. So Other People's Problems is really good. Don't listen to it while you work. Don't listen to it maybe first thing in the morning. It is powerful. It is absolutely powerful. So I think those are some of the examples of types of resources that somebody could build out. There is also a lot of non-clinical resources. There are some, I will jokingly say, but very seriously say, there's this really great TV show called The Office, which is maybe one of the best antidepressants in the whole world. I know a number of people that when they're going through a depressive episode, one of the first things they do is just binge The Office for the 50th time. I think there's a lot of shame that gets thrown at that, but what's happening in those sort of positions are people are safe. People are in a spot that feels warm and comfortable, accepting and loving, and that gives them the ability to sort of cope with a very difficult time.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I finished Arrested Development recently, and that was my jam, and The Office is also my jam, but yeah, some good TV definitely can build up your spirits. All right, Jared. So we're basically about out of time. What I like to do at the end of my interviews is I like to do a little bit of freestyle rapping just to wrap up the interview. So that's what I'm going to do right now.
Okay.
All right. Can you hear that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Yo. Don't be scared of me. I'm talking about therapy, a whole bunch of things that we need up in our minds. I'm busting a rhyme, and that's what I say. I put in that work, because I'm an introvert. So basically I need to get around people or talk to them. And that's what I say. Yo, I just spend a whole bunch of time outside or connected to my people. And that's how I go. And that's what I come with the flow. If you're introvert, you still need to get out there and talk to a person or two, working through every single thing that's up in your mind. I'm busting a rhyme. Yo, teach a lesson about depression. That is just stressing. You need to leave it alone. You need to take down all of your freaking expectations. That's what I'm saying. Just do a thing or two that'll give you life. And that's what I say when I'm here up on the mic. Yo, I come through. Yo, I just say you need some headspace all the time so you can meditate, feel the breath. And that's what I say. You deal with stress by doing that. I move with rest. And that's what I say. I come straight through with a bunch of things that I drop, like some names. Mr. Zinn, yo, I twist these rhymes, and yo, I just send a book recommendation, or maybe two, Brene Brown, and yo, I stay down with OPP, that's other people's problems, so I can solve them up in my own, and that's what I say when I bust off the dome, spit a freestyle, and that's how I go, and that's what I said with a freestyle flow. All right, there we go.
Wonderful.
Thanks. All right, so real quick, Mr. Jared, tell my audience how they can connect with you online, website, social media, the whole nine.
Perfect. You can find me at restorationcounselingofatlanta.com is our website. You can find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram. I believe we've pushed to recently to Instagram. So Restoration Counseling of Atlanta. We just launched an online practice portion that's called Restoration Counseling of Georgia. Those are some of the best ways to connect to me professionally, as well as I usually write a blog post, things like that on our website again, which is restorationcounselingatl.com. I am usually online or I work out of the city of Woodstock office. So those are the places that you can find me.
Awesome. And I'll put all that in the show notes. Jared, thank you so much for just dropping this knowledge, helping people to help themselves, and just help us to get through all this craziness that we're living in. So I really appreciate that.
Hey, it's no problem. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a great day, man.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. So that's the episode. I do have to read this disclaimer real quick. Though Jared is a licensed professional counselor in Georgia, he is only offering his professional opinion. This podcast is not a substitute for therapy, and any medical treatments considered should be done so only after discussing them with a licensed medical professional. Please talk to your doctor before considering medication. All right, so that's the episode. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit subscribe. And also, if you would take a screenshot of the episode and post it to your social media accounts, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, I hope you're well wherever you are. Please stay safe. Please stay sane. And until next time, peace out.